right, so to introduce our special guests, we have a special folder just for that. So our special guests today at CodeJoy are Stacie Isenberg and Colleen Smith. Stacie Isenberg is with the ARIN IU28. And if you're not in Pennsylvania, the IU system is our way in Pennsylvania of like supporting teachers. So in Iowa, they're called the AEAs. Some states call them RISAs, or every state kind of has their own name. But Stacie is with one of the IUs here in southwestern Pennsylvania, serving a few different counties. And Colleen Smith is with ABC CREATE, which is an organization affiliated with the Penn State University, the New Kensington campus, also serving a number of school districts, bringing them into technology. So join me in the chat, welcoming Colleen Smith and Stacie Isenberg. Hello, good morning, good morning. So feel free to unmute you two, and maybe we can just kick it off with just telling us a little bit about your organizations in your own words. We'll go to Colleen Smith first. What is ABC CREATE and what do you do with ABC CREATE?
ABC CREATE is a collaborative of 14 school districts, all outside of the Pittsburgh region. So we've got some suburban school districts, rural school districts, and no urban. So we're a little bit outside. And we came together 8 or 9 years ago with the intention of helping educators to reimagine teaching and learning, with the recognition at the time. I think we were still spelling STEM with periods in between. But really with a recognition that STEAM is not only about technical skills, but also about 21st century skills, future ready skills, but really about changing the way educators approach their classrooms, and how can we bring integration STEAM into the classrooms in meaningful ways. So not simply an add-on, but how can we incorporate it more into the day-to-day curriculum. And so we've developed a community of practice across these school districts where educators see one another at our professional developments. They have begun over the past few years. They don't need us anymore. They reach directly out to their new friends and peers, and they really report that one of the benefits they get is, as someone said in the group, they found their peeps. So to really get that kind of support, so they don't feel so isolated. They have some people to run ideas by, and they can feel like, yeah, this journey is a good one to be on, and I'm around positive people who get it. So.
Yeah. And maybe just to set the scene for the work that we all did together over this past school year, you had grown this from a non-existence into serving these 20 school districts. But what were some of the struggles that ABC CREATE was facing that this program that we all did together was helping to address?
One of the things we noticed were those peeps were showing up regularly, and we developed a really nice group of strong teachers who get it. We were getting trickles of new people whose heads would pop up, and then we'd snag them and bring them into the fold. And with each one, we found the enthusiasm and inspiration that I'm imagining you all have felt as you got engaged with this. And we knew that we needed to be able to reach beyond the core group that was the regulars, and find more people and help them to pop their heads up. So that was one of the challenges that we tried to address with the project we're working on with CodeJoy. And we recognize that they need peer support. They need to not feel alone, and they also need to find an easy on-ramp that allows them to understand what it is they're being asked to do or exploring, as well as build confidence step by step, so that they didn't feel like they had to jump in whole on when it wasn't not necessarily something they were even sure about.
Yeah, I mean, for me as an educator, I really identify with that because my first experience with robotics, I was told that I would be teaching robotics, and it felt like a very big bite. And I did not know where to start, and I had no professional development, and I had no community of practice. And so I just jumped in with my kids and was like, hey, I'm going to be bad at this, but you kids seem nice. Let's try robotics, right? And it takes, not every teacher can do that. Not every teacher has the luxury of being bad at it first. I was in an after school program, so I was allowed to be kind of bad at that first year because there was no accountability system for me, which was great. But I think for a lot of us, like, how do we jump in? How do we smooth out that on ramp so that you can take the most minimal step forward to see that it's different? And then what are the teeny tiny little, like, how can we leave a trail of M&Ms for them to follow to join the party, you know? And ABC Create's been doing an awesome job of that ever since you guys have started. You know, I think I met you maybe a year into it, and like the reputation that you've built with your community is just sterling. Like the teachers that work with ABC Create, who I talk to, often credit it with, oh, I got into this because a friend brought me into this from ABC Create, you know? So it's wonderful to work with people like you who already have those relationships with teachers. So on to you, Stacie. Will you tell us a little bit about ARIN IU 28 and your role within there? What do you guys do?
Sure. Like you mentioned before, we're an intermediary between the state Department of Education and school districts. So whenever new initiatives, new standards, new programs, new requirements come out, our job is to help support teachers in our local school districts for integrating. In addition, we're a general education service agency. So our role is to help introduce and support teachers in new endeavors so that they don't feel alone. One of the things that we do really well is we have networking groups. So we gather those groups of like-minded, job-alike teachers and give them an opportunity to share, and we share resources and strategies. And then, like you mentioned earlier, none of us is as smart as all of us, so that is what we use our job-alike networking groups for. And prior to being at the intermediate unit, this is only my first year, I'm just wrapping up my first year this summer, I was—
You did a good job. Woohoo!
Well, thank you. I was an instructional technology coach for about 10 years in 2 separate districts. Prior to that, I was a classroom teacher. And I was one of those classroom teachers that, you know, hey, there's this new thing called Scratch. We're going to fail at it together, kids. So we had some experience with that. And then one of the districts that I was a technology coach in happened to be a district in ABC Create. And I remember my superintendent saying, I need to take you to meet this person named Colleen so that she can tell you about ABC Create. And I went to Penn State New Ken and I had delicious chips and I met a delightful human being. And when I walked away, I thought, where has this been all my life? And now that as a technology coach, I can share these resources with the teachers in my district. This is fantastic. So when I moved to the IU, 4 of our districts out of the 11 that we support districts in Armstrong and Indiana County. So our 4 districts in Armstrong County happen to also be ABC Create schools. And I did not want to lose that connection and that solid resource. And in addition, I wanted to see if, you know, we could pull some of that into Indiana County as well, because we are an extremely rural school district. We have 7 in one county, 4 in the other. And then we have 2 career and technical centers. And also, as part of my role as a curriculum specialist, my job is to help boost the career readiness initiatives and the future readiness initiatives in all of our school districts. So it just seemed like a natural fit. And whenever the LEADS program was happening, I wanted to be part of it. And I wanted our school districts to benefit from it.
That is a perfect segue into that LEADS program. So ABC Create and the ARIN IU 28, we piloted something together with CodeJoy a year or so ago, but then I think ABC Create, you guys led the charge on this one, and you put in this big, huge, ginormous grant for the PA Smart, which is a Pennsylvania statewide funding that you call the ABC Create LEADS program. So this was an overarching, like, there were a lot of components and parts to this program, but Colleen, maybe you'd explain just kind of what the parts that we did together were, like, what was the kind of progression of those?
Yeah. So, you know, as we said, one of the problems we were trying to solve is how can we engage more teachers? So we didn't want to just keep I mean, we're happy to continue to support, but we wanted to have more teachers to have that moment that Stacie had. And Stacie was already in the space, right? She was already brought on board as a tech integration specialist or whatever your title was. And so how could we help the other teachers? And we had been working with BirdBrain and CodeJoy for a number of years, and we knew that we were really pleased with the products and opportunities in the professional development that we had grown with, and that they were a key to what was working for us. So we were thinking, as Kelsey mentioned, we kind of played around with some ideas and we saw some good potential with that. So the year before, or months actually, weeks in some cases, before we wrote the proposal for this LEADS funding, we were playing around with the idea of how might we use those student shows that you all have the opportunity to participate in as a way of exposing teachers to what is computer science, what does coding look like, do I have to be a roboticist, what is a roboticist, I'm scared, my palms are sweating, my throat's tight. So could we just show them in a very friendly way that did not require any preparation on their part, other than, can I get my kids to see that thing on screen? So we played around with that, and we played around with the notion of, what if we had a teacher who was one of our regulars, or a teacher champion, or whatever you want to call it, and that teacher encouraged his or her peers? What if that drew people in? So we played with that notion, and then we said, okay, so what else do we want to think about here? And we played with the idea of, well, we want to give them an opportunity to come together in person, so that if they're stuck, they don't feel like they're alone, like they watched this student session and they got an idea. So I missed a step. So we gave them then some training, like, all right, just here's some virtual training, and you've experienced that, I believe, already in this group. So you know what that's like. And then we said, all right, so now that's great, but we really want these teachers to feel comfortable taking it into their classrooms, and to have some ways to think about how they can integrate it into their everyday curriculum. How can you make this the 3rd grade community lesson? How can you make this the 8th grade study of whatever you're reading? How can you bring that in? And so we offered then, what if we came together? What if people brought their things, like, I don't know what I have an idea, but I don't know where to go with it, or I'm afraid, and what if the tech breaks? So we put together what we initially called a potluck. But we've redubbed it Botlucks. We think we're really clever with that title. And then we found out that there's a whole generation who didn't even know what a potluck was. And so maybe that was just, we might need to do a little explanation on that. But anyway, so that was what we piloted, those 3 pieces. And we built upon that then, as we wrote into the ABC CREATE L.E.A.D.S, and said, all right, how can we put these elements together and scale it up in a way that we can really reach a much broader audience, and they don't all have to be close, and that it managed. The other problem we didn't talk about, because I guess in my head everybody knows this problem, but it needs to be said. Teachers couldn't get out for PD like they used to.
Yeah.
So, we used to be able to say, well, we're going to dedicate a day and we're going to bring CodeJoy in, or we're going to bring, that was in the days before CodeJoy was so virtual.
BirdBrain. That was how we met, was like, BirdBrain was like, you're going to do this PD, so drive out to New Kensington and do this PD for Colleen. And I was like, who's Colleen? Yeah, I'll do it. I don't know what it is, but yeah. So I'd like show up with my robots, and we'd have a whole room full of people making robots. But yeah, post-pandemic, like you say, we've got a whole day of PD, and like you couldn't get people to come because they don't, partially because they don't have subs. So there was a recognition that like the circumstances had changed. And so your model needed to kind of adapt with the times too, for sure.
Right.
So actually maybe on that model there, I have a little visual to kind of show folks what we mean here. I'll make it full screen so y'all can see it. So this was our kind of like model that we put together. Like phase 1 was Ignite. We did some CodeJoy student shows. And like Colleen said, we like used those teachers who were already engaged with ABC CREATE and ARIN IU 28 to schedule the sessions and then invite their friends. And then we did this virtual professional development. And I think this was a really important part. Y'all gave them free hardware. You gave them a free Hummingbird kit or a free Finch or a free microbit. And this funding allowed you to pay the teachers a stipend too. So they got free hardware and they were paid to attend. And then we did all of that professional development over the course of like 8 weeks. It went by real quick, but it was all like 3 hours after school. We tried 4 to 7. We tried 5 to 8. We did all sorts of different like time periods. Although what was easier here was that everyone was in the same time zone, which is not the case for everybody here. But phase 3 was when we did those potlucks, and also Stacie would push into the classroom to offer in-classroom support as well, which I'm going to ask you about. And then finally, the teachers would launch their own classroom projects. And I think phase 1, we did the first set of CodeJoy student sessions in December. We finished that professional development in March, and the potlucks were in like February, March, and maybe April, I think was the last one. And then we just wanted to see what they could do by May. So I know like December to May sounds like a long time, but you guys are teachers, you know, that's no time. That's no time at all. And we had some amazing results. So Stacie, can I ask you to explain, when you were pushing in for that classroom support, what did that look like? How were you facilitating that?
So I had built relationships with the folks at some of my prior districts that I was a teacher or a technology coach in those districts, and those just happened to be the districts that I serve. So there was a giant element of trust here that really benefited us. Also, I had used a lot of these tools and learned everything that I've ever learned from Kelsey and Matt through their videos and in person. So I had actually had a chance as an instructional technology coach to do some of these lessons. So whenever a teacher that I had already had an established relationship with as being their technology coach from the past came to one of these PD sessions, said, oh, I'd really like to try that, and then came to a bot luck, I totally capitalized on that relationship. I zoomed in. I was like, I will come to your classroom. I need a kid fix. Please let me come hang out with your 5th graders. I miss this. I only get to work with adults now. And they were so open. But then what that did is they had a chance to see how easy this was. They asked me for copies of the script or the lesson that we did. They were taking notes the whole time, and it gave me an opportunity to co-teach with them and model some of this in their classroom. And then some of them, you know, if I wasn't available, I think that boosted their confidence enough. They're like, you know what, I want to check out a bunch of Finches from the lending library. Do you have anything? I was like, I have these really great activity cards. They're laminated. They're on a little ring. They're already ready to go. And they would say, okay, you know what, during recess or after state testing, I'm going to give my kids a chance to see what happens. And then I got all these messages of like, look, these kids, and like they would hold up their you know, their shape that they had the Finch draw or the videos or something like that to show me and share with me what they had done. So it benefited me, again, as getting the kid fix, but I really think it helped a lot of the teachers. And again, I want to stress that we had already had an established relationship, and I totally used that to my advantage.
Yeah, and I think that is an underpinning to this whole thing, especially when we saw with ABC CREATE the kind of traction we got there, and then the traction we got with ARIN IU28. Those personal relationships were key to getting people to stick their toe in the water. So like, yes, we were able to scale it out a lot with virtual PD, with hardware that they were given, with these CodeJoy student sessions, but the really essential like groundwork was laid with those professional relationships that you guys already had and those personal relationships that you guys already had. So like, there was a trust that like, Colleen won't give me crap. You know, like if Colleen says it's good, she won't. No, like if Colleen says it's good, it must be good. If Stacie says it's worthwhile, like, so as you guys listening are thinking about how to scale things out in your district, in your region, in your state, whatever level your brain is thinking at, like
in your hallway,
grade
level.
Yeah, like how can you build on like who's trusted? And how can you build on that trust? How can you I'll say use, but utilize is a fancier word. So how can you utilize the relationships that people already have and build on those to build that trust? And yes, as Amanda Jean is saying too, as we're talking, feel free to pop any questions you may have in the chat. Now we have just a couple minutes left before we're going to break for some discussion time, but I wanted to share out some of the results of what we accomplished with this. So one of them is in regards to student sessions. So with the student sessions, we ended up doing 55 sessions over the course of 3 weeks. We served 4,329 kids in those 3 weeks and 241 teachers, which was so amazing to see so many teachers participating with this. Now, from that data, we didn't know who was new and who had come back. But I know, Colleen, I think you had said previously there were about, for professional development, the previous year, you'd had about 50 signups for PD or so. Is that right?
Yeah, we if we ran an individual like half day or day long sign up, we had gotten into, you know, in our first couple of years, we were solidly at 25 to 30 people per session. And we had run down even before the pandemic, because subs became an issue there, because there was, we were hitting like, boy, if we can squeak out 12. And that's just that, you know, that just wasn't a model that was working. And we knew that what we wanted to do was valuable and meaningful and relevant. And so that we weren't questioning what we were offering, but it was how we were offering and how we could reach.
Yeah, the needs were the same, but the methods had to change because the constraints changed around us. The constraints were heavier than we'd had before. So how do we continue to support with that? So keeping that in mind that, okay, just for ABC Create, for example, if they were offering PDs, they'd get 25 signups each school year, or maybe 50 signups each school year. Compare that to for PD, and actually, you know what? I'm gonna make this full screen because it's a doozy. It's worth it. We had 308 signups for PD this year. That changed in a single year through this program, and that represented 108 individual people. So you can see a lot of those people came back for multiple PDs. So we did that over the course of 7 weeks. We had 13 different sessions. So similar to what you guys are experiencing this summer, except not so many early morning ones because teachers were in school. But we had kind of a similar setup to that. But teachers could choose the dates and times that they wanted to attend. They could choose the tool that was interesting to them. We had different topics that they could sign up for, like Littlebot with Hummingbird, or Rovers with Hummingbird, or Tiny Dancer with Hummingbird. So there were different projects, which is, I think, a big reason that we had so many repeat learners with us. But also, I think that whole stipend thing was huge. Because so many times we ask teachers to do things unpaid, and they'll do it because y'all are passionate. You love what you do. But can you speak to that piece, Colleen?
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned that yet. So I'm glad. I was just like, wanted to highlight that, and you just got it. You just hit it. When we built this, because we had a funding that we could build stipends, and we don't always have that option. So we try to grab it when we can, and so far our educators get it. They get it. If there's money for stipends, wonderful. When there isn't, they don't seem to be not showing up. They understand we do it when we can. But what we're building on is just a tremendous amount of respect for educators and what they do and how they do it. And we want to make sure that we're not adding things to them in ways that are disrespectful. So if we're going to add opportunities for learning, and we're going to, you know, really want to entice them to come, we want to make sure that they recognize how valuable they are and how valuable we think this training is. We've done our best to attach stipends to that. So our stipend rates have been like, it's $40 an hour for what we do. So for those 3-hour sessions, we were able to offer stipends for $120. I also wanted to highlight, Kelsey, when we look at those repeats, what I thought was interesting and affirming was, and we heard stories, certainly, where a teacher did the CodeJoy student session because someone down, and like, these are stories from people I didn't know before this year, right? Yeah. So this isn't like, I heard another story from someone who gets it. This was someone so I had someone out of the blue reach out to me, and they said, thank you so much. And it was a very nice email. But then the story behind it was, they had been, so someone I didn't know, sorry, I got distracted by I know, time is short. I better,
no,
I better keep the story short. Coworker asked me if I wanted to do this thing that they were doing, go to the student session. Coworker said, okay, I'm going to sign up for PD because I can get a free bench robot.
Yeah.
Would you please sign up with me? So that teacher did that. And then but they did one. They're like, sure, fine. I'll do it. I'll get you the Finch robot. I'm
Yeah.
doing it because you asked me, because it was that relationship that we were leveraging, that the
Mhm.
teacher leveraged. And then I watched the signups. I'd be like, oh, look who signed up again.
Again.
Oh, wait,
for a
and
third
another. Oh,
time.
wait, and it's not
Oh,
just
a fourth
because they want to
time.
learn about Finch. Now they're signing up for the hummingbird ones. And now they signed up for the microbit. So we really watched those repeaters. At first I thought, oh, they're just after the stipends.
Yeah.
But I listened to the stories and I watched the way the signups developed, and it was way more than that.
Yeah. I think sometimes we think that like I hear this with a lot of the other organizations we work with, and this is one of the reasons I love working with you two, is I never hear this in our conversations, but some of the other organizations we work with, they're like, oh, the teachers just want the money. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, they probably do. Me too. Like, that is a motivating factor. Let's use it, right? So if that's a motivating factor to get them in the door, that just gets them in the door. If they hadn't found it useful, they wouldn't have wasted 3 hours, because time is more valuable than money when it's April 20th in the school year, right? Your time as a teacher is more valuable than that. So the fact that they kept coming back was evidence that they wanted to be there. The fact that they bought into a new tool was evidence that they wanted to be there. So like, yeah, maybe that's what got them across the threshold to trying something new. But then it was our job to collectively, once we got them across the threshold, bring them into the room and have them play around and show them how easy and fun it is. And we did that, right? So that was something that I was really proud of, that, yeah, the threshold, yeah. So that may have been the initial motivation, but it changed once they saw what it was like in the schoolroom.
And they came back. Another thing that just kept striking me is, after full days, well into the school year, you work a whole day. June is still a far ways away, and the excitement of September is way behind you. They signed up and spent evenings, and not just like an hour thing that I can play in the background while I get my clothes ready for tomorrow. They were present and active for 3 hours after a full school day. Like, they got kids there, some feeding on the side, whatever. They made it work. Just incredible.
To that as well, I think sometimes when you work with people who came to robotics not through education, they have a view of what learning robotics should be like. It should be rigorous. It should look like a PhD program. It should look like a master's program. And sometimes it looks like somebody with their camera off, who occasionally says LOL in the chat, and then 3 weeks later uses a Finch robot in class. Sometimes that's what it looks like, right? Sometimes it looks like a person on screen with a robot over here. They've got a baby on one hip, and they're also using this hand to feed someone else mac and cheese. That is what engaging teachers, meeting them where they are, looks like. So I love that we're all coming at this from an education perspective, from an empathy for teachers perspective, because yeah, some of the groups we work with, they're like, all right, how can we teach like hardcore CS principles? And like, yeah, but also like some people need something cute and fun and kind as an entry point. Like, we're not trying to turn all these teachers into robot inventors. We're trying to teach them into robot educators, so it's kind of a different approach, and engagement looks a little different. So, okay, results. Okay, we did all this stuff. We served 4,300 kids. We got 300 teacher signups. Then our final question was, did this translate into teachers actually doing it in the classroom? One of our survey questions was about how likely you were to teach after the PD. This was like right after the PD was done. We said, okay, we asked them that before and we asked them that after. And at the end of PD, 92% of the teachers said that they were likely or very likely to implement robotics this school year. But did they? Yeah, they totally did. We sent out a survey and asked, okay, did you actually do something this year? And again, remember, they didn't even finish some of this PD till March or April. So they had very little time between then and the end of the school year to actually do something. And there's state tests and there's volleyball tournaments and whatever, right? So like, of the people who responded, and it wasn't everyone, because volleyball tournaments, but 40 teachers confirmed that they had already done something in their classrooms. And I'll make this full screen, and maybe Stacie, you can speak to the library checkouts, because y'all have a lending library. How did you see those lending library checkouts be affected, and why does that tell us anything?
So ABC CREATE offers a lending library, but our intermediate unit also offers a lending library. And when I got to the IU, I asked the person who had access to the data to pull what the 2022 checkouts were. And when I looked at it, it just showed that 11 times somebody had checked something out of the lending library. And I'm pretty sure that was probably me, because ABC CREATE didn't have enough hummingbirds and I needed more hummingbirds. So I like double dipped and got from the, when I was in a district. And then after this started happening, I specifically pulled data from when we started to offer these sessions, which was in October, I believe. That's when the student session started. But that was just student sessions. So from October to, and I believe we put this together in like early June. So from October to June, that number was 63. So that, I mean, is what, almost 5 times the amount of checkouts that we had in our small little rural districts. The enthusiasm and the excitement for using these tools that they had learned about in PD. So specifically, I looked at finches, hummingbirds, and microbits, and we noticed the number, it just skyrocketed.
I'm loving what you said too, because you're like, of that 11 the previous year, some of those were me. So they
were all me.
Stacie checkout.
In full disclosure, if it wasn't me, it was my husband, because he was also one of those teachers. And I was like, you need to learn how to use hummingbirds with your students.
So the Isenberg
with the Isenbergs, yeah,
was deleted from those numbers. So that's 63 non-Isenberg.
There's probably like 2, yeah.
That's awesome. And Colleen, we saw your ABC CREATE lending library checkouts go up too, but you had an interesting observation. So they almost doubled from 17 to 31, but you had an interesting observation about how teachers were sharing resources as well.
Right. So a couple of things why we're not surprised that ours didn't go 5 times up. One is we have a couple of districts where we might have had one sign out, and then the teacher gave it to the teacher across the hall, and the teacher gave it to the teacher down the hall. And so we know that one sign out, we try to get them to say, well, if you pass it to a different teacher, could you make it an official checkout so we can keep track? But that one reality is that didn't always happen, and we would anecdotally get that information. The other thing that we know to be very true is that our districts have had opportunities. So the districts with whom we have established relationships have had the opportunity. So for example, the district that Stacie came from, there are some of our resources that they started saying, you know what, we can donors choose, we can get money from the state, there's an opportunity. We figured out that the IU does lend them also, and that's closer to my house. So we know that many of our districts have figured out other ways to get those resources. But, and we did have, just for the record, we did have one teacher who did spread the word by asking her, I mentioned this for a different district in my head, but she went around and said, I need a classroom set. I'm going to get 14 other people to sign up for this so that in our school, we will have a classroom set of each one of these tools. And bonus, like, that's exactly what we want. So that was a beautiful, like, oh, we didn't even think to dangle that one, but it was beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. When we do that again, I want to dangle that more. Like, do you want a full classroom set? You just need 12 friends. Do you have 12 friends? All you need to do is get 12 friends to sign up for this thing and join us on Zoom. Like, they don't even have to do it well. They don't even have to do it right. Right. But then again, if we get them in the door, that's our job then to capture them, to keep them, to be like, you're a maker teacher now, like, you're ours, And so that was another strategy that worked really well. So I'm conscious of time here. Now's when we want to kind of transition to Q&A. So open call from anybody here in the Zoom. You've got these 2 amazing resources here, Colleen from ABC CREATE, Stacie from ARIN IU 28. What questions do you have for them, either about this program that we did, about them personally, about their organizations? Open call for questions on any such related topics. And if there are none, I know that we do have like one kind of like keys to success thing that we can kind of share, but I also know it takes a little longer to type on Zoom. So now's the point where I always take a long drink of water. Feel free if you guys have a mug. Now's the time when we take a long drink of water. This is how I pause for questions on Zoom. Nice. Is that iced tea? I like for you. Very nice, Stacie. We're all hydrating. We did get a question in the chat. I think this was from Amanda Jean, but she was wondering, what do you think is the most important element to getting tech hesitant teachers to jump in? So if you just had to pick one thing, what would that kind of like, what's the one thing that, or perhaps like, what's the one thing that people don't think about? And whoever's has a response first, feel free to check in. What's like the one thing?
I really am going to stress again the relationships. I know I was hesitant with robotics, and after attending the first hummingbird session, I had a teacher that was with me, and I was like, great, I made my tiny drummer. Done with this now. There's a lot of arts and crafts. I'm not very crafty. I don't like glue guns. And when we left, she was like, I can't wait to do this next thing. And I thought, oh, okay, well, she wants to do it. I'm the coach. I'm the support. I'm going to dig in and learn how to do it. So I really think having a buddy, having someone that you can do this with, because failing with somebody else is so much better than failing alone, right? And thank goodness she had that drive, because then that motivated me to be a better coach, to learn more. And now the Hummingbird's probably one of my most favorite tools to use with students and teachers. So thank goodness that she had that drive and didn't just let me go, okay, no more arts and crafts for me, thanks. So I really think having a buddy, having someone to do the journey with.
Having a colleague who's also interested and motivated to do something like this seems to be one of those differentiating factors between people who actually jump in and people who dip their toe in and then don't continue. So if you're here, maybe you have a buddy at your school or at a different school, is something we talked about in the beginning session too. Like, who's a friend that you can get to do this with you? Because failing alone is so isolating and failing with someone else is so fun. So like, how I love that. That is a quote that's going to stick with me, Stacie. That's great. How about you, Colleen? What would you say is, if you had to pick one factor or one most important factor that people don't think about, what do you think?
Oh, that's a really hard way that's worded. I'm going to just answer. I don't know if it hits all your marks, but I think what's my most powerful tool is storytelling. So when I can collect and say, I can tell Stacie's story and how I can throw in her failing with someone else is much better than failing alone, and how she doesn't like arts and crafts and she still did this. And I can tell the story, I think that I watch teachers' eyes change when they begin to see themselves in a story. And so when I can kind of learn a little bit about them and recognize, like, no, this might be where you're coming from. Oh, I know someone who had success, who shared your lack of interest in arts and crafts or whatever. So I think that connecting, that finding common ground through and sharing through storytelling is something I would add.
Yeah.
Did I get enough to the elements of your questions?
Yeah, I think that as we're sharing this out, that element of storytelling, and to that end, we captured some quotes from teachers as we went. These are 2 quotes from the same teacher. So this teacher said, I can't begin to tell you how fearful I was attending this first session because this is not exactly my cup of tea. That word fear comes up a lot for teachers when trying something new, especially when they're like trying something with consequences. When, okay, am I really going to take 2 weeks out of my year away from drilling those fractions or whatever? Am I really going to take that time away to do something that I don't even think I can do well? That fear is, like you said, when you see yourself in that described me. Mine wasn't, I had to, again, no consequences because I was after school, but mine was like, am I going to look stupid in front of these kids? My kids were really cool too, so I didn't want to look dumb. Or even worse, am I going to set my kids up for something that they're going to fail at? Am I going to make them feel dumb? Because this wasn't my cup of tea either. But that same teacher, by the end, she said, my mind is spinning and I love it. This has intrigued me so much. And I can't say enough how wonderful Kelsey and Matt are at teaching it. But that word like intrigued, that fear turning to intrigue, that is, instead of being on the back foot, that is stepping forward into the unknown. And that is a different approach to the unknown, right? So I love that we were able to capture so many quotes from teachers to help with that storytelling element. I like
that same teacher told me in person, I think it was in person, or it was in an email, said, this has inspired my teaching. And I was like, I'm getting up tomorrow to do this work again, because if we can inspire teachers in ways that, you know, that's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing Nathan's question in Virginia about funding. So Nathan, feel free to clarify. I'll start to answer, and you can feel free to make that more specific if I'm not hitting your mark. But
in case anybody didn't see it, let me read it out so that in case anybody, so he says, in Virginia, there's a state funded program called CodeVA. I know them, they are great. It sounds like your programs are very robust. So how are your programs funded? Where does your funding come from, Colleen?
Okay, so Nathan, the funding for this element of what we do with ABC CREATE came to us through a PA Smart Advancing Grant, and that was an initiative through the Pennsylvania Department of Education that was set out to accelerate and amplify something that was, in our case, something that we had tried and was working, but we wanted to be able to leverage that and expand our impact. Otherwise, ABC CREATE, in our almost 9 years of history now, we get an amount, it's $55,000 a year from the Grable Foundation, and that helps to support the facilitation of the program. That helps to pay for meals when we gather, that helps to pay some for professional development. We don't have funding when that is our only funding. We don't have funding for the things like free robots and stipends. But when we can secure out additional funding like this PA Smart, we write in deliberately to add those elements. We also are funded, each of our participating school districts contributes $2,500 a year. So their skin in the game is that amount per year. And we occasionally get little bits and pieces here and there, $500, $1,000 from, but that's, you know, that's random and doesn't happen very often. But sometimes we stumble, and we'll take it because that allows us to replace some tech in our resource library. And we didn't do all of the things we're talking about in 1 year.
Yeah.
So if you're starting from zero, we started from zero with that initial bit of funding. And so we built our resource library over time. And we've managed to do some of these things over time. So you don't have to have all of that all at once.
I think a lot of organizations have like multiple sources of funding. Some of them come with little earmarks, like this can only be used for this can only be used for that. But if you have like the vision of like, okay, what do we want to accomplish? Okay, these people will help pay for us to gather the teachers together, and we know we need that. These people will pay the stipends for teachers to attend. These people will help us replace elements of our technology. Okay, so that PA Smart grant funded a lot of this program, but even without that funding, you've got 501c3 funding from funding from Grable. So like ABC CREATE is very similar to CodeVA. Are you familiar with CodeVA, Colleen? Have you heard of them? Chris Dovey is one of the people who runs that, and he's a reporter. He's like a tech reporter, an ed tech reporter, and he's very like look at how funds are being misused, and like, let's make sure we're funding the classroom, and this thing is too expensive and that doesn't work. But like, he's very great at celebrating the wins, but being honest about the losses. And so I think that kind of mentality is really central to CodeVA too. And I think that's true of ABC CREATE as well. It's like, that's not good enough for teachers. We're not putting that in front of them. Like your job, which you take really seriously, is in some ways to be the gatekeeper of what gets put in front of teachers. Because if it's not good enough, it doesn't go in the library, you know? So how about the IU, Stacie? Where does your funding come from? How are you guys set up?
IU funding is a mishmash of a lot of things. So there are some funds that come from the state level to help support different initiatives. And that's where you mentioned when certain things are earmarked, like this funding can only go towards this. And then we also have some grant funding, and then that pot of PA Smart advancing grants. A lot of times what will happen is a larger IU will write for funding, and then they will say, as part of this, we're going to disseminate this across the state, and they use the IUs to do that. So we do get funding for certain earmarked programs that were a pot of money that another IU may have received. And our IU in the past has received some PA Smart targeting grants to help fund things. There are donations from the Pittsburgh Penguins, for example, helped supply our lending library. And then our school districts also pay to be part of the IU, but they pay for different services. And so to try to explain the funding sources of an intermediate unit is something that I might have to get back to you on in about 5 years once I fully understand it. I know, for example, the state budget being at an impasse right now here in Pennsylvania, you know, we're not allowed to go anywhere or do anything. We're kind of at a freeze at the moment. So, and different IUs are funded differently. So it's a little bit difficult to explain, but what we have found is working with some of the STEM ecosystems, or trying to build a STEM ecosystem in which all of these places that are trying to do similar things come together to share and pool our resources for the ultimate benefit of helping our teachers and our students in our area, has been one of the best things that we could possibly do.
Yeah, that idea of like funding and where does everybody get the funding from? It's usually, well, this and that and the other thing, and the sports team contributes, and this the John Deere plant contributes, and like there's actually a lot of funding sources, especially from for-profit institutions with nonprofit elements to them, like you know, Pittsburgh Penguins, they're a for-profit sports team, but they have this foundation. So if you're looking to get creative about funding, maybe look at some of the folks in your local area. If there's any kind of engineering, health, things like that, they can help you get creative. And I know Colleen has some more ideas about that too.
I was just going to say, I have found throughout my experience funding to be, some people are whizzes and they're very comfortable in the space and they know how to go after. I'm not necessarily that. And so I have always been, I feel like I think it's helpful to know that you can take small steps. So you were going there, but I wanted to point out, like some of our school districts, when we initially started out with funding from the Grable Foundation exclusively, and support from Penn State, New Kensington. Mm-hmm. We then asked the districts to put that skin in the game that I mentioned. And so we asked them to contribute $2,500. Some of the districts didn't have that. Like others are well resourced, and it was like, yeah, okay, whatever, we'll write it from here. Sometimes the school board had to go through rigorous review. We were out presenting at school boards, explaining why we thought this was worth their $2,500. But the one thing I really wanted to comment was, at least one of our districts, but I think it might have been 2 or 3, they went to their PTOs and they were asking, like, listen, if we could get some of this is what we can do to spin it back around in value to the students. And that, you know, I was like, wow, that really got my attention. Like, okay, they want this, they don't have it, they can get, and so to me, that's like, you know, what are the on-ramps?
Yeah. Some
of those small spots where you might start. And then, you know, over time, I think they've been able to build it into their school district budgets and come up with other ways. But sometimes it's that grassroots, that homegrown.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you both just a brief, what's something that you're looking forward to in the next year with your organization or with coding and robotics? What's something you're looking forward to in the next year? And whoever wants to can jump in.
I'll jump in. I have found recently in my role, since one of my main jobs was to support career readiness and future ready skills. And I have found from my past life as a technology integration coach that we tend to compartmentalize. We always have the STEM teacher. It's either the gifted teacher, library media specialist, the person who is serving as a rotation at the elementary schools. And that's the only place where students get to learn coding and robotics. And another thing that we're also doing here in Pennsylvania is we're compartmentalizing career readiness. It's usually the guidance counselor or the BCIT teachers that are helping you write resumes while you're learning word processing. So one of the things that I'm excited about is to take those two things, which are actually very interconnected. And I recently did an activity with administrators where they had to learn how to get a hummingbird tricolor LED to blink and a motor to turn with somebody else with nothing but a set of instructions and their partner. And then we talked about how many team building skills and growth mindset skills they used and communication skills they used. And we talked about how that is something you use in your job. One person made the comment of like, well, I immediately found my partner here who has actually had some experience with hummingbirds. And I thought, how many of us start a new job and we immediately gravitate to the smartest person in the room or the person that has the experience that's going to help us the most? These are all career and life ready skills, and they're so integrated. So one thing I'm excited about in the upcoming year is to figure out how to marry those two a little bit more.
Excellent. How about you, Colleen? What's something?
I don't know. I'm blown away by that. I didn't know you did that, Stacie. And I'm like, oh,
I just did it
that's
last week. It was just last week, so I haven't had a chance to tell you about it.
I'm gonna think about how I can use that. Yes, thank you. What else?
And if I may, just one second, Colleen, because I found something in my email that I was looking for while you were talking, Stacie. You were talking about how we've we've managed to stylo STEAM as well. We've managed to silo that out from all the other content areas. And as proof of that, I went to a summit virtually earlier this year, and it was about K-5 CS. So who's doing computer science in the K-5 space? And so this is just my email here, so you can see how many I have unread. But that turquoise area, which represents 89% of schools, in 89% of schools who are teaching computer science to all kindergarten through 5th grade kids, one or more specials teachers or media specialists teach all the children. So instead of everybody using this as a literacy, they're pushing it on one person, and then one person's the expert. And when that person leaves, the whole school loses it, you know? And so I love what you're saying about bringing that from one person across the whole discipline. That is really exciting. And I'm so sorry, Colleen, what are you looking forward to in the coming year?
I don't want to answer that. I want to go back to you. I just want to, I want to build that within ABC Create. That is really what we're striving for. We're with our district, some of whom started with very little exposure to this 8 years ago. We are happy, like when they come to me and say, "Hey, we've created the STEAM teacher or the STEAM special, and that's our big change, and you'll be so proud of us." I am. Because that's a step, and that's what works in that district in that moment, and there's this piece of my brain that's trying really hard not to show on my face that is like, oh, but we want you to do that more differently. Because ultimately what we want, is those K-5 teachers, classroom teachers, to be just, this is how we're studying the 3 Little Pigs this year.
Right.
Incorporated, because there are so many ways they can, and we're getting there, and not everywhere, not all our teachers, not all our districts, but I'm watching that movement with more and more teachers getting that, and that's what I think the goal is. What am I looking forward to? Because I'm like a good student, and I feel like I have to honor the like the assignment. Mine's a little different. I am excited in that it's not 100% in this space, but it is tangential to this space. And I'm feeling Stacie and Kelsey and maybe even Amanda Jean kind of like, what is she? Where's she going with this? I'm looking forward to the power of the teachers across districts growing, and how we are looking at ways to capitalize and leverage that to impact full communities. So how can we carry that, and how are we carrying that into out of school time spaces, libraries, Salvation Army kids camps, YWCA camps? How can we leverage that to reach the populations who aren't showing up in full force in other spaces? So, the robotics camp that fills with a bunch of white boys, and their parents can drive them an hour to get them to that camp. How can we use what's in the communities in ways to reach the full community so that we are getting the children of color who have not been at those, and that we're you get where I'm going. I don't want to, I want to be certain that we are not getting it into every classroom is a beautiful thing. And we know that learning happens everywhere all the time, and we need to expand that. And I've seen, and what's growing and what I'm excited about is in some of our recent work, this cross-district collaboration community practice kind of thing that is coming on its own. I'm feeling that power. We're doing a kids camp right now, and watching teachers from 4 districts coming together, so happy and learning from each other. I found out in a sidebar at that there's a teacher who's helping with the camp who's been meeting this summer with another teacher from another district who's in her like 3rd year teaching. And they've just invited someone from a 3rd district that they happen to, and they're meeting at one of the teachers' houses like once a week for fun to play with educational technologies. Like, show me how to use what you know how to use, and then I'll show you what I do on their own, no stipends.
Yeah.
Maybe lunch is provided by the host teacher. I don't know about that, but like, how can we take that?
Yeah.
What can we do with that? And I'm not trying to use teachers in that way, but like, there's something there, it's bubbling. How can we support that in ways, or make that more visible and make that, like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. So there's something there that excites me to pull on.
To sum that up, it's like teachers are not just a single professional working a job. Teachers are active community members. When you improve a teacher's life, you improve the community's life, because teachers don't keep it to themselves. Teachers share it.
Right? Who's capturing that for the quotes?
Amanda Jean's got it. She's always got it. Okay. When you improve a teacher's life, you improve the community's life, because teachers, when you invest in a teacher, you invest in the community, because they don't keep it to themselves. They share it. Right. And so it's kind of like invest in small businesses. And as a small business, like, yes, please. But also like invest in teachers, because they are the small businesses of their communities. They generate learning and fun and opportunity for everyone they touch. So I love that, Colleen. I love that what you're excited about is like, if last year ABC CREATE had 50 engaged educators, this year we have 100 engaged educators. And like, it seems like we're reaching a critical mass here where it's just kind of taken off on its own, which is really exciting. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Don't take off, either of you, but everyone, if you would help me welcome them or thank them in the chat for being here. Thank you so much, Colleen and Stacie. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.